Hi, everyone. This is Evo Haining, and thank you for joining me for the latest chapter in the Realitycraft workshops on creativity and world building and how to bring your visions to life. I am looking forward to sharing with you today on the language of Promptcraft and how we build 3D worlds, starting from concept and language and visualization and building tools and workflows that can work together to help us create the kinds of worlds we want to see in the world. So I'm really glad to be here with you today. I've been creating both immersive, interactive, physical, as well as virtual spaces for over 25 years. I've been a producer, a creative technologist, a strategist, someone who works deeply in AI for the last 20 years. And I've written scripts about how we bring these tools together and use them effectively for social impact campaigns and for some of the things you might be working on, whether it's rebuilding housing and creating an eco-village or thinking about a virtual space that might help your people come together in a unique way. So this section, we are going to talk a little bit about how we choose your tools, not just my tools, but your tools and the ones that you're going to use, and specifically how we choose the right prompts for the right tool at the right time. These tools are honestly evolving faster than many of us can keep track. The videos that happened a few months ago may not be relevant today, and new models are being introduced all the time. I will not be able to share all of the details I know about some of these models, but we will be able to talk a little bit about some of the updates. And those include to video tools, to 3D tools, to LLMs, and also to some of the other tools that you might be trying to use, whether that's skyboxes, tools like Flux or Playground, Blockade, image generation tools, and all of the other things that bring together to create an immersive scene or some sort of interactive environment. Now, that could be, again, a physical thing, and that might include something like Gaussian splats and other types of volumetric or 3D capture. So we're going to talk about how to bring your vision into worlds, but we're also going to talk about some of the creative tech tools and capacities that might help you blend the physical world, maybe an existing site or a place or a piece of art, with a virtual environment, and how to make those things come together into something that feels meaningful and real and valuable to people. So today we're focusing on the language of Promptcraft. These images are made in a tool called Ideogram. This one we did before in our last section in Canva and using a handful of other generative video tools. And look at that, our ducks didn't even appear today. So some of the image generation tools that we've tried, for example, using Canva, have not necessarily proven to be durable enough for programmatic or for publishing development, right? So while a tool like Canva, which we're using today in presentations and we've used in some of our previous experiments, can generate a 3D asset or an image, those images may not be at a high enough resolution or publishable for the kinds of workflows we're talking about now. If you're trying to do a high-end concept development, you're trying to do a virtual environment, a digital twin, something along those lines, you might be looking for an NVIDIA level professional workflow. And so this, for example, this flowchart comes from NVIDIA, and it really looks at everything that you'd be bringing together in your Omniverse experience, including your images. Now, that could be 5 images, that could be 500 images. Your 3D assets, again, could be 5, could be 500. Videos, brand or IP approved assets, all of the things that create your world, right? The story, the music, the sound, all of the playful elements, the interactions. All of those things are going to come together into your scene database, right? So a USD or a universal scene description is going to bring all of your scenic components into a single environment. That is what Omniverse does. That is what other game engines do as well. So whether you're thinking about a professional environment and something that's ready for publishing or broadcast, or you're thinking about something that might be just more sort of playful in a game environment, right? These are the sorts of things that we've been doing in Luma Dream Machine that you could take over to Unity or play Canvas, for example, and begin to make into different types of game environments, right? Whether you're choosing a professional workflow or you're thinking about something that's going to be more of a virtual environment, interactive space, right? When I'm thinking about these kinds of spaces, the kinds of questions I'm asking often have to do with how these things are going to be received and perceived when they go out in public, right? So this sort of imaginative world building sort of things with labradorite walls, these are things that I do for my own personal creative flow because it makes me feel good. It puts me in an environment that I want to be in. Now, if I want to publish this, I have to think about, well, is fidelity most important or is load time, right? Do I want something that's going to give me a low poly experience because I know it's going to load on browsers and give people across all different devices the best quality experience? Or do I want something that's really going to give me the flash and the shine and the light of iridescence and playfulness and all of the light that can happen in certain types of environments where ray tracing is involved? So we've talked a little bit about the different types of image generators in our previous workshops. We've also talked about the kinds of language of Promptcraft that you might need to use in order to get the kinds of images for the world that you're trying to create. And some of those are words that are related to the method of output, the point of view, the thing that you are trying to center in your story, right? The iridescent car in this case, the vibe, all of those things are part of the Mad Libs approach that we're thinking about when we're creating a specific prompt that will elicit an entire world or an experience, a scene, a vibe. We want it to feel rich and not just sort of mid or basic, right? And so the more information we're giving it, the better off it's likely to be. Some of that is information that's regarding the parameters or the constraints, the print methods, the aspect ratio, or even the audience it's intended for, right? Because that's going to help the if it's an image generative model or a transformer tool for video, it's going to help it fill in the blanks and give you what you are looking for more effectively so that you're spending less time and credits generating things that work for you versus not work for you. So much of refinement in Promptcraft and in your language is getting closer to your prompt before you ever run anything so that you can go ahead and sort of maximize your generative time and not spend a lot of wasted credits out there just trying everything under the sun. It's good to use a free tool or two to try lots of things to experiment, but it's also good if you're paying for those credits and you're in a system where you only get a few generations a day or a month to really make those count and make sure that you've included all of the elements of, you know, if it reference images or other assets that are needed to get you as close as possible to your actual concept. Right. So we talked about some of these words and the language of finding these words in your prompts, right? Tonal language might include emotional characteristics. Some of the image generators, for example, can even use emoji or other types of tonal information in order to express a feeling, a vibe, a mode of peacefulness, right? And same with palettes. Some of these tools are giving you a little bit more refinement and control to say, I want this tonal image to be in sepia tones or all in blues or all in oranges and that kind of information. So we're starting to find that these tools are giving us more control and they're moving closer to professional art palettes instead of these sort of random image generators as they were a few years ago. So being able to start to refine the lighting and how a camera might move through a scene, these are all of the things that you might find useful when you are refining your language of Promptcraft. So we're going to be looking at some of this in video generation and in world building, but I wanted to think about for 3D language specifically. If you're thinking about prompt engineering, you're thinking about writing a prompt that you might come back to again and again. These are the kinds of words that we haven't talked about much yet. This is geometry language. For example, the kinds of things that are useful to game designers. There are words like isometric or even the word 3D, that means something different in a generator than they might mean to you and me having a conversation. And so the kinds of shaders or textures that game designers use, the language of those shaders and textures can also be used in your prompt craft. The colors, the color palettes, even from previous games, you can reference those in your prompt craft. The same with a style reference, right? So you can ask your prompts to really pull from existing types of color palettes. I like to use neon, day glow, vibrant, saturated color palettes, but you might prefer sort of a noir, black and white, half tone landscape, right? You might be trying to create something very minimalist or liminal, right? So those words are also very useful. The word liminal, to create a liminal space, can do all sorts of things you may not expect. And it may have unintended consequences, but these are also words that you might want to experiment with if you're thinking about creating a new space. So, specific vocabulary, let's get into it in terms of if you're thinking about creating a physical environment. These are the kinds of words that you might want to try and use. I tend to like to use dots and orbs, stippling and pointillism, so orbs and spheres and globes. You may find that you have a very different style or geometry, but all of these language sets that are used in game design, in other art forms, may also be beneficial if you're thinking about how to sculpt a world using your words. And so the prompt structure, if you're thinking about building a world on a single prompt, and there are a handful of tools that will build an asset that you can take straight to Blender or to an XR platform on a single prompt, right? We've looked at a few of the Skybox tools as well. So if you're thinking about structuring this prompt, it needs to include the scene detail and then detail of the individual objects, the maybe 3 to 5 things you really wanted to focus on. It's not going to remember 25, but maybe 3 to 5 items, their properties, right? Like the iridescence of the car. There are certain ways in which you can have things pop using light or color, or really thinking about design in the way in which a game designer might think about drawing your attention to something very specific in a scene. So placement, lighting, and all of those other properties have a role to play in how these scenes are developed. And you can put every aspect of that in basically 25 to 50 words. So you're going to find that there are going to be problems. Now, we talked about this with text before, right? So kerning is a problem. It's going to give you impossible geometries if you're thinking about architecture. Some things are going to come off as nonsense. And so this is where remixability, being able to take your design and go back to a canvas, or be able to just iterate and remix and maybe see this in another way. So using Luma Dream Machine last night, I was trying some relatively impossible architectures and thinking about how to use tools like Dream Machine. And this is on their existing model that's available for the public. They do have a new model that is coming soon. And I would encourage you all to give that a whirl when it's available and ready for you all. But you can see how basically by using the language of architecture, but combining it with words, and I'm going to show you the prompts shortly that got me there. Combining a bright palette, right? This sort of hyper realistic, saturated palette with a type of architectures that it could reference, right? So Gothic and archways and Art Deco. These are the kinds of things that help it create a world that it figures out how to inhabit. Now, some of you know, you've seen me make these sort of labradorite and crystalline homes. Some of you know I've been creating those spaces for about 20 years, and I take those prompts from my fiction writing and I bring them into my prompt craft. Now, with this scene, I was really happy. I was excited to see that it took it in this sort of really beautiful, sort of hyper visual way. But in this scene, I was a little disturbed with where it took it. This doesn't really look or feel like my world at all. And it was sort of weirdly like gothic. But not in the way I was hoping for. It was sort of dark Victorian, but not, again, what I was hoping for. So when you're thinking about generating scenes, images, and 3D assets, you're going to find that there's a fair amount of refinement that you're going to have to do. And you're going to have to go back to the drawing board a couple of times and maybe rewrite how you are working with these tools and their workflows. So that's going to take you all the way through your process as you generate a series of images. And you're going to find that maybe you get part of the way down the road with a tool and find that it isn't that useful for you. So this is where you're going to need to maybe iterate, step back, test, see if the workflow works, and then apply it, maybe curate down from the 150 things you generated down to 25 that you're actually going to use to train your model. Many of these tools you can use to train your own style, your own model, your own IP, and really use that to build the world that you're looking for. So once you give it 25 or 50 or 100 images, it understands the contours of your world. It understands your lighting choices and your color palette and your style. And then it's going to help you fill in some of those gaps. But for you, the inquiry has to be around what can be photographed, right? What is it I'm going to use from the real world, right? What is it I'm going to create or generate or fabricate? Right? So, what needs to be imagined? What needs to be generated? What needs to be designed? What is something that can be purchased off the shelf from a 3D asset store, right? Are there assets already out there that you can just plug and play and bring together and make a site plan? There are apps that do that. I have my VR headset here. I've been using it to bring together architectural site plans using a tool called Archeo, right? Archeo can then export to other building and planning tools. But can I bring together my physical scans with my virtual assets and have it be one environment? That workflow is still shaky. So, how you will combine these tools, those assets, the workflows, like if you're thinking about a game engine, that's going to be really important for you to consider as you're going along and making these decisions for yourself. So, clarify your parameters, know what you're producing, get clear about what it is you want to create, get clear about the constraints. And some of those are going to be audience related constraints or publishing related constraints. Some of them are going to be usability, right? So maybe I'm going to focus on low poly, so I know it's going to work well in a browser, but I'm going to sacrifice the detail of high poly 3D assets, right? Because maybe I don't need that for the kind of a game or experience or world that I'm building. So those are some of the considerations. And then there are all of those other considerations that would be considered ethical. And that might include, how was this model trained? Is this a company that I want to work with and have on the roster in terms of my credits? Right? Do I want to tell people I worked with this company, or do I actually feel uncomfortable about the ways they're working with the world? There are companies that I choose not to work with. There are companies that I think are great. Now, there are companies that I work with actively to improve because I can see that the tool is good, but maybe the choices they're making, I don't personally agree with. Right? If I want a protopian world, I have to go and advocate for that. And that means going back to the CTO or the CEO of a company and saying, can we make this tool better? Can we train it to be more responsive or accurate or less biased? All of those are ways in which we as creators are constantly giving feedback to the world and using our tools effectively. Now, I gave you some physical real world photos here from sites that I've done in previous site plans, because this is a process that I've been working on for almost a decade. Some of you know that when we've been looking at the integrations of XR and immersive world building with AI and 360 and all of the other sort of systems design work that happens. Some of you know this has been happening inside conference rooms like this one in Medellin, Colombia, that I was leading in 2017, right? So AI isn't new. This is working on AI across the entire city's transit and smart cities initiatives and figuring out how the procedural side and the situational awareness side of AI could meet the safety and the public interest needs of getting people home safely every day, whether it's by train or bus or in the public parks. So sometimes we use our creative technology tools to design systems that need to work for people, and they're going to use technologies that they may be uncomfortable with, right? So here I'm in a city hall in a town in Colombia, and I'm shooting with a 360 camera, and you can see that the janitor back there is like, what are they doing with the plant? Right? But in this case, the mayor had signed on and had asked for our support in helping them to design transportational awareness, right? Same with using 360 and rebuilding after disasters. And as we've seen from our dear friends in LA, all around to North Carolina, to Lahaina, people are facing tremendous tragedy, and we need to use our tools to face the real challenges ahead of us. Those challenges are related to resiliency. They are also related to how we apply our best minds, our best information, our best data, our best designs, and our best information about what materials are resilient in order to build better communities. Now, that includes choice of materials and being able to project out the cost of a project from a site plan. And I will tell you, I've been working on this for the better part of a year now. The AI tools for construction and being able to plan a project are are starting to get there if you do traditional stick builds or if you are working within a very specific type of industrial building ecosystem. If you're thinking about natural building materials, biogenic building materials, hempcrete, all of the ways in which we design more resilient eco villages and homes and communities, things that can resist fire, those solutions are not yet being well integrated with the best of our AI tools and our BIM tools. So, as we're trying to redesign what cities can look like and thinking about how we use our virtual spaces to build communities, right? Whether those are physical or virtual, I want you to be thinking about how we are actually combining the physical and the real in order to enable each other to design something more effective. Because obviously, AI can be used for deepfakes and can be used for a lot of damage. It can also be used to create something more beautiful if we choose to use it that way. But we have to make sure that our tools are enabled to do that with us. And so this is where generative has to kind of give us the handshake to what is the physical world and how do we use AI and the language of Promptcraft specifically. How do we bring together all of the things we've learned about generative and procedural and bring that together with situational awareness, with Gaussian splats, with a better scan of an entire scene and being able to integrate all of those assets into a single source of design truth and collaboration, right? So in our previous workshops, we talked about many of these elements and how to bring them all together. Now, understanding that the canvas elements, the tools are generally not enabled for the kinds of UX that we would hope for, right? The user experience is sorely lacking, especially in generative video tools, but it's also in world building tools. Blender is wonderful. It can do so many things, but it is not necessarily user friendly or easy to pick up. So you may find that you have to build a team in order to be most effective in doing all of this work, right? As a prompt engineer, you are now empowered and enabled to do the creative work of envisioning the world with your language, with specificity, with all of the world building tools that we've described together. So, this is again summary from what we've learned before: how to get the most out of your prompt craft: clarity, specificity, context inclusion, right? So, think about multi-turn interactions if you're using an LLM, and really building on previous work. If that's building on previous image video generations, for example, right? Building on a library of work in order to train a scene and train a style, right? You can do a number of different types of things that allow you to train all of this into your own art style and your own generative models. You can even release those tools out on tools like Hugging Face. You can put something out on GitHub and build your own tools that really work with the industry of APIs and plugins that are available out there today. I will say your mileage will vary when you try to plug and play with some of these tools. Not all of them are going to work well for you. So what is real? Is it real? What do you think? Is it real? That croissant is real. Yeah, that was my real puff pastry. I did make the generative video using my real images, but basically I just composited with 2 images. So is that a reality? Maybe, maybe not. For some people, any use of generative, whether that's generative images, generative video, any use of generative technology, for some people will mean that it is not real. And you're going to be confronted with that if you're doing this work in public in any real way. So we were creating environments and worlds and thinking about the LLMs and the things that help us create those spaces. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of how I've been doing that. And as some of you know, I've been using Notion, especially as a way to help me build those multi-turn interactions and to build synthesis, but also to explore basically AI agents as capable programmed assistants. Sorry.
Avatars with Realitycraft.
Some of you remember from the last sessions that we were exploring how to build avatar agents, and there were very realistic agents. I believe HeyGen just did a deal with some of the other major tools to be integrated into a number of other media assets. So we're going to start to see these very realistic avatars and the pushback against them. Whether you're developing those in the kind of image generators that you see here, Midjourney, we looked at Runway. We also looked at some of the lip sync comparisons in our previous videos, if you want to take a look at those. But you'll find that there is some pushback whenever you're going to work with avatars or AI agents. If you're working with AI agents on the back end, just to help you to be more productive, they can be very helpful, right? So you can use them to organize, you can use them as production managers and line producing, basically assistants. None of these tools replace the work of a real human being. So I will say there is no replacement for having a great creative team. And whether you are making a world, a game, a video, a site plan, a concept design, there is no replacement for having great collaborators. These tools at best enable you to do the sorts of things that make it easier for other people to access these things, right? So whether you're thinking about fun looping art, the kinds of things that give people an alternate view of reality. I've been toying with the things I see in my dreamscape lately using Luma Dream Machine, and I'm going to show you a little bit of how I come into these kinds of imaginative loops. And let me go ahead and head over to very quickly. I wanted to get to the limitations before we use Luma Dream Machine, because some of these tools we've been using, such as Canva, many of these tools cannot write a flow chart. Many of them cannot do actual work when it comes to thinking about synthesis and breaking down. Many of our tools, for example, are able to do a basic bio writing or a prompt writing, right? To take all of my prompt words and write them in 25 words or less for my blockade skybox. That we can get it done. But when you're thinking about complex work, and even things like website design, these are the sorts of things where you're going to find the edges of where generative tools are today, especially in AI agents, but also when it comes to blending the real and the physical, right? So if you're taking a Gaussian splat and you've captured it on your phone and you're trying to blend the real and the physical in a place like a rival space or in Omniverse or Play Canvas, maybe you're trying the super splats, you're going to find that there's a fair amount of messiness, sort of a fuzziness, and the quality is going to vary depending on which tools you're using for capture, but also which tools you're using for being able to bring together that scene. So if you need the highest quality scene capture and then distribution, if you're thinking about publishing to a virtual production stage, you're probably going to be building a system that works within like NVIDIA Omniverse. You might be using Unreal Engine. These are things that are a little pricier and are not going to necessarily work with a completely open source toolkit. There are people building completely open source toolkits and using relatively open source immersive environments and game engines out there. I will say they are not necessarily able to do all of the other types of things that we've talked about in terms of integration of your assets, compositing, also interaction design. So I'm a big proponent of open source movements. I will encourage you to try things on GitHub and to get in touch with the creators and to collaborate, and also to do what you can to own your own AI, understanding that there may be publishing opportunities that you're sitting with, right, in your own blue sky that do not fit with what's out there currently. It may be too dystopian for you, it may not be appropriate, and it may be something that just doesn't work for the kinds of things you want to create. All right, so I'm going to stop our screen share here and I'm going to go to a different screen and I'm going to take you through the Luma Dream Machine that I was doing a little bit earlier. And there was also, I just needed to make sure that we don't have information that I can't share with you, as so many of these tools are being developed in real time. Sometimes that means that they are not necessarily ready for prime time. And sometimes these tools are still in beta. Um, when we were doing our workshop a few weeks ago, we were talking about eco villages and community building related to the fires in Hawaii and Lahaina. So I used that as an opportunity to jump off and look at the different types of resilient architectures that could exist and how we might engage those. So I wanted to show you quickly how Luma Dream Machine works. We are inside Luma Dream Machine here, and I have a catalog of different concepts basically that I've been building. Some of them are more playful, some of them build on humans or architectures or art, or those funny little minions that were saying it's real, right? Lots of different playful ideas. I find that Luma Dream Machine is very good for motion graphics, for some visualization and concept design. I really loved where it came across for this kind of art. But again, I'm using a wide variety of language sets, and you can see words like neon flames, at the cellular level, vibrant day glow colors. These are the language choices I'm making in order to get to these kinds of experiences. And then I'm extending the videos to go from 5 seconds to 9 seconds to 13 seconds. So I found that this kind of language set, again, I'm combining scene description with words about palette and color and style and lighting and also a little bit about the type of lens. Um, I find that that gives me very good imagery overall. Now, to do something abstract, to do something very different, let's say you're trying to do something more dreamy, you may look for words that use the words abstract. So I'm going to take you up to the beginning of this scene. And often when I am generating inside Luma Dream Machine, I'll be doing lots of different generations. So I wanted to show you a little bit of what that looks like. So I asked for abstract Maori stippalism. I wanted toned dots, right? So that I feel like this one comes closest to nailing what I was looking for in terms of tonal quality. So I don't know if you think this works, but when I went to go make video, I found that it did some very interesting things. And so I asked it to show more, and I'm going to do that again. Show more is going to ask it to continually play with some of these ideas. Now, maybe I want to swap out some words. So infinite, maybe I want cyclical. Maybe I want something that feels like cycles. I do like the word vibrant, but maybe I want something luminous. And so these are using Luma Dream Machine, you can very quickly change out these descriptive words, right? The elements in language of Promptcraft and really change it up quickly to see something that's slightly different, but maybe has a different tone or a different vibe or energy. So, ooh, I like where this one's going, right? So maybe I wanted to make one of these into a video. And again, the kinds of words that I'm going to use in video prompts are going to be slightly different than for an image prompt because I'm giving it camera information. So I'm going to say push in because I wanted to zoom, like move into that scene. Camera push in to undulating. Oh, I have to spell that word. Undulating, vibrant orbs. All right. So that's very quickly how I'm using a mix of language, right? The kinds of language that we talked about earlier to create videos. And those take about a minute usually. And then if I make a scene that might be 10, 15, 20 seconds, I'll do one at the end that says make a loop. And what Make a Loop will do is bring it back to the original keyframe. If you've made video before, or even in gaming and animation, you know that the keyframes are those sort of signature stopping points for a video, right? So the beginning and the end in this case are going to be the same keyframe. So this will be a looping video, and it seems like we have gotten to be pretty slow, and I apologize. I think it's probably that I've got so many videos running here, but you can see as it iterates, it's going to find different ways to move through this information. And I like these organic tests because they can really quickly create very abstract and unusual worlds, right? So finding your own language and figuring out how you want to play with that. And then once you've made a 20-second clip, doing one more extension and saying make a loop then gives you a 25-second looping clip that you can use as your backgrounds and all of that. Um, let's go through some of the other quick choices that you can make here, and we're going to do this on one of the other boards. Let's use the crystalline interiors board. Now, you can get silly and very sort of playful and surrealist with these tools. I did reference one architect who is living, which is not my usual style, but there's a particular architect that I love named Freddie Mamani. And so I referenced him, and I was so excited to see where it took Freddie Mamani's style. He is Bolivian architect and is very inspired by his indigenous tribes' color and texture and the ways in which the indigenous skirts move. And so bringing some elements of his style into architecture, I felt like some of these architectures that are more Gothic and Art Deco look like something we've seen before. They look like something out of the movie Wicked, or they look like some world that feels a little bit more like we've maybe seen this world before. But some of these look completely different than any world we've seen before. And they look like a castle out of an animated feature. And I get really excited when I see something that looks pretty unique. And so we're again using the exact same language, but in this case, you can see the choices I'm making. So I'm giving it materials choices. In architecture or in 3D design, you're going to need to give it as much information about shapes and patterns, materials, anything that has to do with the 3D space itself, right? And then once I'm here, I have these different options. Show more is going to keep iterating, giving me 2 more videos. Brainstorm is very interesting, and this is a way for you to play with your prompt craft. You can go in here into brainstorm, and it says, for example, it'll pull it into a couple of different options, right? So it's trying to understand like how to refine what I'm looking for. I wasn't really looking for stained glass, but I'm really excited by the idea of the feldspar columns and Freddie Mamani's colors together. So maybe let's try this and let's try I have found that certain words I like if I put something as an architectural marvel, it will look like something out of Architecture Digest or out of a magazine. And so using words like that are going to reference very specific types of things, I'm going to get something that is staged or set up slightly differently as a scene. So your mileage will vary on all of these, right? So maybe this is too cartoonish and not really what I'm looking for. But wow, it's fascinating, isn't it? Right? If you're thinking about world building and you're thinking about how do I quickly iterate, this might be one really great way to see one particular world, right? One particular image in 20 different ways. So, as we've tried before, you can use your images as a reference point, and it gives you keyframe and end frame. So, you can set in a video both the starting frame and the last frame. Now, if you flip this from keyframe over to modify or reference, if I use reference, I can use lots of images. And it's not going to use any of those images in the generation. It's just going to look like those styles. So I can give it a couple of different ones that I want it to look like it's in the style of. And then I will say, let me just copy and paste this. So I'll pull that from earlier. And there's a couple of different ways to do that. Ooh. Look at all that weird. It pulled all sorts of weird code in there that I didn't see. Funny. So your mileage will vary, and sometimes you should pay attention before you hit return. I'm going to go ahead and stop here, but I'm very curious what all of that is going to bring because that's a messy prompt. It did do a very good job of pulling from the style of the previous images. Maybe it's a little too soft and not realistic enough, right? These look a little too fictional, but it's still a good start, and that's a fascinating way to go with it. So I'm going to go ahead and stop for now on the recording side, and we're going to bring back the slides and we're going to come back in and talk just a few minutes more, but let me go ahead and stop the recording 1 second.
The broadcasters in your
Thank you so much. All right.